I'm Claire Morgan, 33, single, and the sister no one expected much from. At least, not compared to Sophie, the bride, the golden girl, the one they all applauded. I walked into her wedding alone. No partner, no fanfare, just whispered, pity, and a seat in the back. They smiled. They judged. They thought I'd die alone. What they didn't know was that I had proof. And by the end of the night, the groom was gone. And so was the fairy tale they built on lies. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told you're not enough, this one's for you. Drop a comment if you've ever called out the truth no one else dared to say. And hit subscribe. Because the most powerful revenge is refusing to stay silent. I'm a marketing director in Seattle. And last Saturday, I walked into my little sister's wedding alone. I wore a burgundy gown, once my power color. It used to make me feel unstoppable in a room full of men with louder voices, but today, it didn't feel powerful. It felt like armor from a battle no one saw me fighting. No ring on my finger, no date on my side, no applause waiting for me at the door. Just a polite smile from the usher and a quiet seat at the very back. My parents sat in the front row, glowing with pride. My dad never looked up from the program. My mom gave me that look, sweet on the surface, sharp underneath. At least she dressed appropriately. I could hear her thinking. My seat jammed between my cousin who FaceTimed her dog and my whiskey-soaked uncle who'd already started slurring his compliments. I'd thought about bringing someone, a friend, a coworker, even considered hiring a +1 just to keep up appearances. But something in me refused to fake it this time. I wanted to walk in exactly as I am, not because I believed it would be enough, but because I wanted to believe that, one day, it might be. Then came Sophie, my baby sister, floating behind me in white lace, glowing like a portrait come to life. "Claire, I'm so glad you came," she said softly, brushing my arm. "Of course," I smiled. "I wouldn't miss it." She tilted her head. "You came alone." The question landed like a pin in a balloon. Light, but just enough to sting. I joked. "No one brave enough to handle me tonight." She laughed politely, but her eyes scanned over my shoulder, searching for someone who wasn't there, someone who'd never been there. The ceremony started. Music, vows, tears. It was everything you'd expect from a Pinterest-perfect wedding. And I sat in the corner of the frame, smiling for the photos I knew I'd be cropped out of later. Have you ever been in a room full of people clapping for a version of happiness you've never been allowed to touch? That was me. A supporting character in my own family's fairy tale. The one who made it in the real world. But still wasn't enough to matter when the lights were on and the camera started rolling. But that day, what none of them knew was that I hadn't come just to smile and survive another wedding. I'd come to the end of one. The ceremony moved in slow, elegant beats. Vows exchanged beneath an arch of cream roses, soft piano music dancing through the rafters. The crowd beamed. Phones hovered in the air. Sophie looked radiant, like she belonged there, like she'd been rehearsing for this role her whole life. And maybe she had. I sat still, smiling, but not present, applauding at the right times, laughing softly when others did. On the outside, I fit the mold, but inside, I was fading by the second. Just one more empty chair with a name card no one would remember. Then came the speeches. Dad stepped up to the mic, adjusting his glasses with both pride and purpose. He held a folded piece of paper in his hand, but he didn't look at it. He didn't need to. He'd waited his whole life to say these words. "Sophie," he began, "you are everything a father could hope for. Kind, generous, graceful. You bring light into every room, and today, you shine brighter than ever." The crowd let out a collective sigh. He smiled wider. You've always known who you are. Always follow your heart. And today, that heart has led you to a man who loves you as deeply as you deserve. He paused, just long enough for the moment to feel intentional. And then, he said, there's our other daughter, Claire. My name dropped into the room like a cracked wine glass, sharp, quiet, and uncomfortable. She's our free spirit, independent, adventurous. We always say, she doesn't follow the crowd. She blazes her own path. Laughter, soft, polite. The kind meant to ease a sting that shouldn't have been there in the first place. And one day, he added with a grin, we hope someone will love her the way Daniel loves Sophie. More laughter. A few claps. One or two sympathetic glances tossed my way like charity. I didn't move. Just tightened the corners of my lips into a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It wasn't what he said that hurt. It was everything he had never had. All my life, I've worked harder than anyone I knew. I built a career from nothing, led campaigns that won national awards, traveled alone to countries I couldn't pronounce at first. I built something real, something lasting. But in that room, all of it vanished. Because Sophie wore a white dress, and I wore burgundy. Because Sophie had a man on her arm, and I walked in with silence. Because Sophie became the dream, and I became the footnote. I could feel the weight of it on my chest. Something old and familiar. The ache of invisibility. Of being the other one. The still waiting. The maybe someday. I looked around the room, wondering how many people had already reduced me to a warning or a whisper. Don't end up like Claire. She has a nice job. Sure. But no family, no ring, no real legacy, not like Sophie. The applause rolled on, and I forced myself to join in. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to be the bitter one, the jealous one, the sister who couldn't be happy. So I clapped. Quietly, mechanically. But something in me had shifted. Not broken, not snapped, just cracked. And what slips through the cracks, sometimes, is light. The speeches faded into music. More champagne, more staged smiles. The air in the reception hall smelled like sugared florals and forced laughter. Sophie had disappeared to change into her second dress, a blush-toned number she'd obsessed over for months. Guests wandered toward the bar. Others swayed on the dance floor, lost in the illusion of forever. I stood near the edge of it all, watching. That's when I saw him. Daniel, the groom. He stood just a few feet from the band, leaning in close to Brianna, the maid of honor. His voice low, his hand resting, just for a second, at the small of her back. Her laugh wasn't loud, but it lingered, soft and private, like a joke meant for only two people. To most, it probably looked harmless, maybe even sweet. The groom thanked his best friend for helping pull off the day, a moment of shared joy. But I knew Brianna. We weren't close, but we'd gone to high school together. She had this way about her. Charming, magnetic, and calculating. The kind of girl who could wrap a room around her finger and still act like she had nothing to do with it. I watched her tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. His hand still hovered near her. Her shoulders tilted slightly toward him. Their body language wrote a language I'd seen before. A language that didn't belong at the altar. My stomach tensed, but I brushed it off. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was projecting. Until I checked my phone. No new texts. Just the usual post-toast buzz, half-hearted congratulations, photos I wasn't tagged in. And then, an old message floated to the top of my screen. One I'd ignored weeks ago. From an unknown number. Just a single line. Watch your sister's fiancé. Not everything that shines is gold. I remembered rolling my eyes when I first saw it, figured it was a wrong number, or a prank, something to be dismissed. But now, standing there, watching Daniel lean in again, listening to Brianna's laugh echo faintly over the music, I couldn't unsee it. My heart picked up pace. Not from anger, not yet. From knowing what it looks like when something isn't quite right, when affection crosses a line too easily, when two people forget the room around them. I took a slow sip of champagne, but the sweetness caught in my throat. Maybe it was jealousy. That's what they'd say. That I was single, bitter, seeing shadows where there were none. Or maybe I'd learned, after years of being the outsider, how to spot what others refused to see. I kept watching. At one point, Daniel reached down to adjust his cufflinks, and Brianna leaned in again. Close. Too close. A whisper followed. She touched his forearm. Quick. Familiar. I turned away. I wasn't going to ruin my sister's wedding over a hunch. I wasn't going to create a scene based on body language and intuition. But something in me had shifted again. Another quiet crack. A voice inside me. Steady, calm, firm. Whispered, "Don't let this go." By the time dessert was being passed around, tiny slices of lemon cake with candied violets, I wasn't tasting a thing. My mind had moved elsewhere, away from toasts and Tool, away from the carefully curated joy. It circled one image over and over: Daniel and Brianna. That whisper, that hand, that laugh. I needed the truth, so I started asking questions. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. I flagged down a young waiter, probably no older than 22, carrying a tray of empty glasses. "Hey," I said softly, "have you seen the groom? I think he went to check on something, but I can't find him." He didn't even hesitate. "Yeah, he went upstairs with the maid of honor, like 30 minutes ago. I think it was room 416. My chest tightened. "Thank you." I moved quickly, slipping through the kitchen, past chefs too busy to notice one more woman in heels disappearing through the service hallway. The back staircase was dim and quiet, a contrast to the music still pulsing through the ballroom below. I climbed carefully, counting each step like a prayer. 4th floor, room 416. I stopped in front of the door, heart pounding against my ribs. From inside, I heard laughter, muffled, but familiar. The kind of laughter that should never exist between a groom and someone who isn't his bride. I raised my hand and knocked. Once. Soft. Nothing. Again. Firmer this time. Still silence. My pulse was a war drum now. I could feel my hands sweating, my breath catching, my logic unraveling. What if I was wrong? What if I'd convinced myself of something that wasn't real? What if I were about to become the jealous, bitter sister again? And then the door opened, just a crack at first, then wider. Brianna stood there, startled. Her dress was halfway zipped, hair slightly tousled. She blinked when she saw me. "Claire, what are you doing here?" Her voice was light, but her face was drained of color. Before I could answer, Daniel appeared behind her, shirt unbuttoned, jacket missing. His expression went stiff the moment he saw me. "This isn't what it looks like," he said. I almost laughed. "You're actually going with that line," I said quietly. Brianna stepped forward. "Claire, please, don't ruin this. Today is special for Sophie." "No," I said. "What's special is the woman you're pretending to celebrate while sleeping with her fiancé." Daniel moved closer. "You don't have proof. You say anything, you'll look insane." And maybe I would've, if I hadn't had it. I pulled out my phone. I hadn't meant to catch them. But a few days ago, I installed a background recording app on my phone for work, something to help me take meeting notes without interrupting flow. I'd forgotten it was still running. I opened the app. It had been recording for over 4 hours. The last 25 minutes. Exactly what I needed. I hit play. Laughter. Shifting fabric. Then Daniel's voice. Clear. Low. Intimate. No one can know about this. Brianna's reply. She'd be crushed. Poor Sophie. I didn't look at them. I just let it play. Their faces drained, like the sound itself had pulled the air from the room. You know what you're about to cause? Brianna whispered, her voice shaking. Yes, I said, slipping the phone back into my clutch. And for once, I'm ready. I left room 416 with shaking hands and steady feet. My heart hadn't slowed, but something else had settled inside me, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't guessing. I wasn't overreacting. I was holding the truth in my palm. And this time, I wasn't putting it away to keep someone else comfortable. I could have pulled Sophie aside, found her in the bridal suite, whispered the truth into her perfect day, and watched it quietly unravel behind closed doors. That would have been easier, cleaner, more polite. But that also would have been expected, because that's who they thought I was. The sister who wouldn't cause a scene, the one who swallowed her instincts for the sake of peace, the one who always sat one row back, nodded through the insults, and smiled through the shame. Not today. I wasn't going to protect a lie dressed in roses and satin just because it looked pretty in photographs. I walked back into the ballroom like someone stepping off a battlefield. The music was louder now. The lights are warmer. Sophie had reappeared in her second dress, laughing with guests. Daniel was nowhere in sight. My eyes scanned the room until I found him. Jaden Ross. He was standing at the tech booth, behind the soundboard, focused on the screens like nothing in the world could shake him. I'd known Jaden for years. He ran audio for corporate events I helped manage. Quiet, precise, never asked questions he didn't need to. I made my way over. He looked up. Claire, you look like you've seen a ghost. Something close. I said, I need your help. His brows furrowed. What kind of help? I need you to play something. From my phone. Audio only. During the speeches. Jaden blinked. Is this part of the program? Not officially, I said, but it's the truth. And I need it heard. He studied me. Not without doubt. Just calculation. You sure about this? I nodded. Absolutely. Jaden leaned back. Okay, you tell me when. I exhaled, long and quietly. I had a few minutes to change my mind, a few minutes to do what I'd always done. Keep the family clean. Keep the illusion intact. Let the fairy tale go on just long enough for the guests to leave happy. But I'd played that role too many times, and the ending never changed. I wasn't doing it anymore. I found an empty table near the back, sat down, and pulled out my phone. I played the clip again, not because I needed to hear it, but because I wanted to remind myself what gaslighting sounds like, what manipulation feels like, what betrayal looks like when no one else is watching. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about embarrassing Sophie. It was about something deeper, something older. I was tired of pretending, tired of shrinking, tired of being the mirror everyone used to feel better about their own lives. Tonight, I wasn't the problem. I was the warning, and they were finally going to hear me. The clinking of glasses echoed like wind chimes on edge. The lights dimmed slightly as the DJ announced the start of the toasts. Voices hushed, laughter softened. The air shifted, just enough for the hair on my arms to stand. My father, already halfway to the mic, adjusted his tie with that familiar rehearsed confidence. He loved moments like these, moments where he could be the proud patriarch with a glass raised high, blessing the image he always wanted the world to see. He cleared his throat. Sophie, he began. You've been a light since the day you were born. A soft soul. A kind heart. You've never given us trouble. Only pride. And now, you've chosen a man who reflects that grace. Daniel, welcome to the family. Applause. Soft. Steady. And Claire, he added, with a nod in my direction. Thank you for being here. You've always walked your own path, a little different, a little wilder, but we love you for it. It wasn't love, it was tolerance, packaged in diplomacy. I stood. The room stilled. I'd like to say something, I said. There was a pause, one of those moments where the silence hangs too long. Then Sophie turned toward me, smiling. Of course. Claire, she said. Come on up. I walked to the mic. My hands weren't shaking. My voice wasn't caught. I didn't need notes. I didn't need approval. I just needed them to listen. I won't speak long. I began, scanning the room. I just want to share something real. Something I heard today. From the back of the room. Jaden looked at me, waiting for the cue. I gave the nod. The music faded out. The lights dimmed slightly more. Then came the audio. Laughter. Muffled but distinct. Daniel's voice. Low. No one can know about this. Brianna's reply. She'd be crushed. Poor Sophie. Gasps. One near the bar. Another from the bridesmaids' table. Someone dropped a fork. The audio continued. Rustling fabric. A kiss. More whispers. Sophie didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the speakers like they were cracking open her entire world. Daniel stood slowly. This is insane, he shouted. This is taken out of context. What context justifies cheating on your bride on the day of your wedding, I asked. The room went deadly quiet. No music, no clinking, just eyes. And breathe. And one unraveling illusion. Brianna tried to step back into the crowd, but one of Sophie's cousins moved to block her path. Phone in hand. Where are you going? Maid of honor Joey turned white. You don't know what you've done, she hissed to me. I met her eyes. No, I said. I know exactly what I've done. I turned to Sophie. She hadn't spoken, hadn't cried, just sat there, frozen, hands resting on the tablecloth like she was afraid even her fingers might betray her. I knelt beside her. I'm not sorry for what I did, I whispered, only that I didn't do it sooner. She blinked, once, twice, then stood. And with both hands, slow, deliberate, she lifted her veil off her head and let it fall to the floor. Daniel, she said, voice calm but cold. Give me the ring. He froze. What? The ring, she repeated. He looked around like someone might save him. No one did. He slid it off, handed it over. She held it in her palm, stared at it like she was saying goodbye to something sacred, then dropped it into her champagne glass. A soft, final plink. The lie was over, and the room would never be the same. The moment the ring hit the bottom of that champagne glass, the entire ballroom shifted, not in sound, not in light, in energy. The air grew heavy, charged, real. For the first time all day, no one was performing anymore, not even the bride. I stepped back, letting Sophie have her space, her silence. I didn't expect applause. I didn't expect hugs. What I didn't expect, though, was the rage I saw coming straight at me. My mother's heels clicked across the floor like gunshots. Her face flushed red, her voice cutting through the shocked murmurs. You ruined her wedding, she hissed. How could you, Claire? How dare you? I didn't flinch. Before I could speak, Sophie did. No, she said clearly. She saved me. The room stilled again. My mom's mouth hung open, confused, as if Sophie had just broken character mid-script. She saved me, Sophie repeated, turning toward her. From a man who never loved me. From a life that wasn't real. From a ceremony built on lies. My father sat down slowly, pale, eyes unfocused, as if someone had pulled the curtain back on a stage he never wanted to leave. Phones were still up, still filming. The glow of screens danced along the walls. A few guests clapped softly. Some just stared. Others whispered behind their hands or into wine glasses. I walked out of the room with my head high and 1,000 thoughts rushing through my skull. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel proud. I felt drained. Like I'd been carrying a secret so long it had become a second spine. And now, finally free of it, I wasn't sure how to stand. Before I reached the door, someone caught up to me. A man. Tall, quiet. I recognized him vaguely. A groomsman who'd barely said a word all night. "Claire," he said gently, "what you did back there. It was brave." I turned, too tired to smile. "It was necessary." He nodded. "Still, it was admirable." He handed me a card. "If you ever need an ally." I tucked it into my clutch without reading the name. Just grateful someone had seen me without flinching. Outside, the air was cold and honest. I stood on the sidewalk in my heels, surrounded by petals and noise, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. My phone buzzed. Then again. And again. I pulled it out. 17 texts. 9 missed calls. 3 voicemails. Notifications piled up like snow. A friend from college. "Wait, is this you in the video?" A coworker. "Holy shit." That was insane. A DM from a stranger just watched what you did. Thank you. Someone had posted the audio. Someone else had shared the moment Sophie removed her veil. By the end of the night, hashtags were trending. Hashtag wedding of the year. Hashtag brave sister. Hatch maid of honor tragedy. The world didn't know the whole story. They rarely do. But the truth, the raw, ugly, inconvenient truth, had made its way past the dance floor, past the catering table, past the carefully folded napkins. It was out, and I was still standing, tired, shaken, hollowed out, but no longer silent. The next morning, my apartment was still, too still, the kind of stillness that follows something explosive. Curtains drawn, cold coffee on the table. My phone lay face down, still vibrating every few minutes with a new headline. A message, a notification from someone who hadn't spoken to me in years. Until now, I didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. I wasn't ready for the outside world. Not when my insides still felt like they were rearranging themselves. I'd told the truth. I'd pulled the curtain, and the world had watched it fall. Around 11 a.m., the doorbell rang. For a second, I considered not answering, letting it ring, letting whoever was on the other side give up and go away. But then I heard the voice. "Claire, it's me, Sophie." I opened the door. She stood there in an oversized sweatshirt, no makeup, hair tied in a low knot that looked like it hadn't been touched since last night. Her eyes were puffy, her cheeks bare, but she didn't look broken. She looked awake. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside without a word. We sat on opposite ends of my worn leather couch, legs folded under us like we were kids again. The silence was thick, but not hostile, just raw. She looked down at her hands for a long moment, before finally speaking. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to." I said, "No, I do." She looked up. "Thank you. I wasn't expecting that. Not everyone would have had the guts," she continued. I didn't, she exhaled, a shaky breath that carried years of pretending. You know what hurt the most? She asked. Not the betrayal. Not really. What hurt was realizing a part of me already knew, deep down. But I didn't want to look too closely, because if I saw it, I'd have to deal with it. And I wasn't ready. My throat tightened. I spent so long thinking my worth came from being chosen. Sophie said, from having someone love me in front of everyone. I thought if I had that, I'd be enough. But I got lost in the story. She glanced at me. You didn't. You never did. You tore off the blindfold, even if it meant everything else came crashing down. We sat in silence again, the kind of silence that says more than explanation ever could. Then, almost out of nowhere, she laughed. A real laugh. Small, but honest. You know what Mom said last night? She asked. She called Grandma Elaine, furious. Said you ruined the family. I raised an eyebrow. Of course she did. Sophie grinned. Grandma didn't miss a beat. She told her. No, sweetie. The family ruined itself. Claire just showed us the wreckage. I let out a laugh I didn't know I was holding. I left too. Sophie added. Dad was furious. Said you turned the whole thing into an emotional protest. Said you'd end up alone. I looked at her. Calm. Better alone than surrounded by liars. Exactly, she said, lifting her mug of cold coffee. We clinked mismatched cups like two survivors in a war no one else admitted happened. Before she left, Sophie handed me a small envelope. Don't open it until tonight, she said. Trust me. That night, I did. Inside was a photo. Us. Maybe 7 or 8 years old. Dressed as superheroes in matching capes and plastic tiaras. On the back, in her handwriting, thanks for saving me, like you always did. I just needed to remember. I cried. Not out of sadness, but for everything we'd buried. And maybe, finally, for what we still had time to rebuild. It was 4 days later when I heard another knock on my door. This time, I didn't move right away. Something in the weight of it felt familiar. Not urgent, not casual, just practiced, measured. When I finally opened it, my mother stood there, hair pinned back, lipstick faint, no coat, despite the chill in the air. Her eyes scanned my face like she wasn't sure who she was about to speak to. Maybe she wasn't. Maybe I wasn't either. I had to see you, she said, voice soft but controlled. I stepped aside, gesturing her in. She walked slowly through the apartment like it was a museum of someone else's life, carefully curated, not hers to touch. She didn't sit until I did. We faced each other across the coffee table. No coffee, no tea, just silence thick enough to press against my ribs. I've been thinking, she said. A lot. I nodded. Waited. She folded her hands. I don't agree with how you did it. I want to be honest about that. Of course. But, she continued, eyes meeting mine now, I also don't agree with what happened. And I don't agree with how long we've let it happen. That part I wasn't expecting. She looked down for a moment, then back at me. You're not Sophie. You never have been. I didn't flinch. She took a breath. But that doesn't make you less. For a split second, I thought she might cry. She didn't. Neither did I. Those words, simple, late, imperfect, weren't an apology. They didn't rewind the years I'd spent chasing their approval, or sitting at the kid table at 30, or biting my tongue every time I was called too much, too sharp, too different. But still, they mattered. Not because they fixed the past, because they cracked something open, a window that had been nailed shut since I was 15. You know, she said quietly, when you were little, you were always the one who asked too many questions. You saw things others didn't. That scared me. Why, I asked. Because you couldn't be shaped. We sat in that truth for a moment. Then she stood. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said. I'm not even asking you to come home. I just wanted you to know I see you. Maybe for the first time. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. You're braver than I ever gave you credit for. When she left, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt human. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. It was 2 days after my mother left when my phone buzzed again. This time, not with viral headlines or passive-aggressive family group chats. It was a name I hadn't expected, one I barely knew, yet hadn't forgotten. Ethan Reed, the quiet groomsman, the one who'd caught up to me just before I walked out of that ballroom. The man with a calm voice and eyes that didn't flinch when the world cracked open. His message was simple. Coffee. Maybe somewhere with a view. I stared at it for longer than I needed to. Then typed back. Yes. We met that Friday, just before sunset, at a rooftop cafe tucked above Pike Place. String lights hung low, swaying in the breeze. The air smelled like roasted espresso and salt from the bay below. It was the kind of quiet that didn't demand small talk, and that alone was a kind of freedom I hadn't known I needed. He was already there when I arrived. Dark sweater, sleeves rolled, a book beside his mug, half read. He stood when he saw me, like no one had ever taught him to treat people any other way. You look lighter, he said gently. I smiled. It's amazing what happens when you stop carrying everyone else's silence. We sat for hours. No drama, no posturing, no pretending to be anything more, or less, than who we were. He didn't ask me to rehash the wedding, didn't poke at the scandal. Instead, he asked about my work. What campaign was I most proud of? Where I wanted to travel next? What kind of music I play when no one else was listening? And somewhere between the second and third cup, he said something that stopped me cold. Your story, he said, could inspire a lot of people. I blinked. What do you mean? He tilted his head slightly. Most people don't stand up in a room like that and tell the truth, even when it's obvious, even when it's needed. But you did. I shrugged. I didn't do it for anyone else. I know, he said. That's what makes it powerful. The wind picked up slightly. I tucked my hair behind my ear and looked at him. Really looked. He didn't see me as the angry sister, the bitter one, the troublemaker. He saw a woman who told the truth, even when it hurt. For the first time, I wasn't being measured against Sophie, or marriage, or some imaginary timeline I was always behind on. I wasn't someone's disappointment or warning label, I was just Claire. Not the problem, not the outlier, not the scandal, the solution, the beginning of something honest. When the sun dipped below the horizon, he walked me to my car. No expectations, no pressure, just the kind of quiet that feels like safety. And when I drove home, I realized I wasn't looking in the rearview mirror anymore. It had been weeks since the wedding, since the audio, since the veil hit the floor and the ring sank into champagne like a warning bell. Only the brave could hear. I hadn't gone back to the house since, not because I was angry, but because I wasn't sure there'd be anything to go back to. But Sophie asked me to come, not with pressure, just a text one afternoon that read Sunday lunch. Just us. You can leave whenever you want. So I went. The house hadn't changed. Same white shutters, same slightly crooked mailbox. But something in the air felt lighter, like it had finally exhaled after holding its breath for years. My mom opened the door. No grand gestures, no forced smiles, just a short, sincere hug, the kind that says, I don't know how to fix this, but I'm trying to show up anyway. Dad was in the kitchen, stirring something that smelled like rosemary and garlic. He nodded at me, a little awkward, like he wasn't sure how to greet a daughter he'd never fully seen. We ate together. No lectures, no comparisons, no pretending. Sophie talked about her new design program. She was studying interior design now. Said she finally felt like she was building something that belonged to her, not something that looked good in other people's eyes. I asked questions. She lit up. At one point, Dad cleared his throat, looked directly at me for the first time in years. I saw your campaign, he said, the one with the Women's Foundation. It was impressive. I blinked. You watched it. He nodded. It was brilliant. Actually. Thoughtful. Bold. He didn't say it like he was doing me a favor. He said it like he meant it. And just like that, a small crack opened in a wall I thought would never move. Mom didn't say much, but she stayed present. She didn't change the subject. She didn't shift uncomfortably. She just listened. And for her, that was louder than any apology. There were still things unsaid, still fractures beneath the table, but no one was pretending they weren't there. And that was new. After dessert, store-bought pie with burnt edges we all pretended to love. Sophie walked me to the porch. The sun was setting behind the trees, and for a second, we stood in silence. I'm glad you came, she said. So am I. She smiled. Do you think we ever be the kind of family that doesn't flinch at the truth? I looked at her. We already are, I said. We're just learning how to live with it. She nodded. That's enough for now. And for the first time, it really was. 6 months later, I found myself at another wedding. Same soft lighting, same clinking of glasses, same promise of forever wrapped in ivory and applause. But this time, I wasn't hiding in the corner. I walked in without a mask. No forced smile. No borrowed date to make me feel more acceptable. I wore a dark green dress I loved, not because it made a statement, but because it made me feel like myself. And sitting beside me was Ethan, calm, steady, present. Sophie sat on my other side, hair pulled into a simple braid, her laugh light and real. We didn't have to say anything for it to mean something, but halfway through the first dance, she leaned over and whispered, I think things had to break, so we could finally find each other. I didn't answer right away, just let the words settle. She was right. Because somewhere between the fallout and the forgiveness, something else had taken root. Truth. Not the kind you shout to win, but the kind you live quietly, deeply, without asking for permission. As the music swelled, Ethan reached for my hand, not to complete me, not to rescue me, just to remind me I wasn't alone, not anymore. But not because someone had chosen me, because I had chosen myself. For years, I thought revenge meant destruction, explosions, doors slammed. But the best kind of revenge, it's not fire, it's growth. It's showing up whole in the exact place where they said you never belonged. It's rewriting the script they wrote for you and making your own ending. And this was mine. I wasn't the bitter sister. I wasn't the scandal. I wasn't the footnote. I was the woman who told the truth and walked away without shame. If you've ever been cast as the difficult one, the loud one, the one who couldn't play along, this story was for you. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't fight. It refuses to disappear. Thanks for listening. If this moved you, leave a comment and share your own story. This is Revenge Stories, where the truth doesn't burn bridges, it builds better ones.